I submitted, gentleman from Illinois, have a document that you want in the record. That will be included as well. Next, as we go to the questioning, we have a large number of members of the panel. What I plan to do on the Democratic side, on the Financial Services Committee, obviously I can only speak for that, is to give members the choice of which panel they want to talk to. As we get to the member, if you would prefer to defer and ask your questions of a later panel, that would be acceptable. So I am going to do that myself. I'm going to save my questions for the regulators, and I will therefore not be asking questions of this panel. And so I will now, the gentleman from Alabama, and that, as I would say to Democratic members on the Financial Services Committee, if you want to ask this panel, fine. If you would rather defer, you can defer. There's no guarantee we'll get to everybody anyway. But
Mr. Chairman, let me get a point of clarification. Can we ask this panel a question and the next panel a question?
In terms of recognizing Republican members, you can do pretty much what you want.
I think we'll just right. Let everybody.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Let me, Ms. Dorfman, you and Mr. Gordon, y'all's testimony is similar, and I think part of that testimony is the SBA should just lend money directly. In other words, bypass the banks. Is that what I'm hearing, Ms. Dorfman?
Yes. What we find is the banks have not been lending, and the best way to get the money into small businesses would be to provide a direct lending program through the SBA so that the small businesses actually access those funds.
And Mr. Gordon, is that
what I propose? And this is the problem in banking today. You go in for a loan, you deal with a bank officer. He has no idea what you do as a manufacturer. At the SBA, there's so many smart people there. If you just set up a task force for jobs in the SBA and you had 3-member panels, one from a SCORE member and 2 from an SBA person, they could review and call in, and in 30 minutes they could decide if it's a good loan or not. I mean,
okay, that's what I'm saying is you want the SBA to sort of
I want the business to be back in business loans.
Sure, I understand.
Okay, and that's the whole point. Is like there's no
I understand your goal is to create jobs and get lending going, but what I'm saying, I think essentially you're wanting the SBA to come in and loan additional amounts of monies because the banks aren't doing it. Is that
because they're not doing it because they don't understand business? They don't. But it's a big problem. Banks do not understand business.
I understand that. Okay.
But that's true. I want the SBA to work on it directly.
I understand what you're saying. Do you believe that the banks or that the SBA is as qualified as the banks to make decisions on lending and credit worthiness?
No, I don't. I think they're more qualified.
More qualified.
More qualified.
Ms. Dorfman?
Much more qualified.
Okay. You believe that the SBA would make much better decisions as to lending? I
think that if you first of all, we have such a huge problem out there. We would have to.
Well, I understand there's a huge problem. I just want to focus on which one is better qualified.
I think that we need an expanded criteria, and the SBA is more qualified to deal with business loans.
How about Ms. Moore?
I would say that what we've seen, not just from the economic turndown, but from years prior, that the banks typically go cherry picking. They'll take the best looking loans. It costs them the same to do a loan for $75,000 as it does to $10 million.
All right, let me. Okay.
And so, in order to move forward, if we take the money, put it to the SBA to allow them to lend, and would we have to put in a program that would help them
I
determine?
understand.
Yes.
So you want the SBA to basically play the role that the banks have a quote, as you say, not played by not lending. I guess.
I would like the SBA to have a direct lending program for small business.
Now, how big would the two of you visualize that program of being, and how many, to do any good?
Well, if we can take the funds that the president was going to give the banks and just turn it over to the SBA.
Okay, all right.
And that's a drop in the bucket, really.
$30 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
To put it in perspective, $30 billion is 3% of the original money for the first stimulus package. So the goal here is to take 3% of the money and creates 75% of the jobs that we need, and it's just not enough. $30 billion is not enough. We'd like to start there,
Okay.
but it's just not enough.
All right. Let me ask you this. If the loans aren't paid back, who is ultimately responsible in your understanding? Is it the taxpayer?
Well, at this rate, there are few default. When you take a look overall at what the SBA lending has done, there is a relatively low default system. What we've seen that with the banks have.
But no, I understand. But if the loan's not paid back, who?
It would be absorbed by, of course, the SBA because we've backed it up.
Where does the SBA get its money?
We understand that it's taxpayers, but this is an
Okay.
investment in the U.S. economy. It's small business
Well, I
growth.
understand.
that
I'm not arguing
Right.
with you, but it is the taxpayer that ultimately is on the hook if it's not paid back.
Correct.
Ms. Gordon, is that your understanding?
That's exactly right. Well, right now the SBA guarantees 90% of a loan anyway. So they're guaranteeing 90% of something that's not getting done. The other alternative is to continue paying unemployment compensation. There's a 100% chance. Well, that it needs to be looked at because if you don't act, there's a 100% chance.
Let me
that you're
just
gonna
ask
pay
you one other
unemployment.
question, if I can. Are y'all aware that we're spending so much we're going to double the national debt in 5 years and triple it in 10 years? Does that bother you? Maybe is that a concern?
Okay. What we're doing here is we're investing in businesses to create jobs to get people
Well, I
off
understand. I'm
unemployment.
not asking you that.
It's a very important issue because if you don't understand why we need to make loans, and that's what the banks don't understand, the banks would move quicker if they were paying the weekly check for unemployment. But since they have no expense in the weekly check, then they don't.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Yes. Ms. Dorman.